There is a war that has been fought in every generation of the church, not with swords, but with songs. It has no single battlefield, because it is fought in every sanctuary, every living room, every hymnal, and every hard drive, where someone decides what the people of God are allowed to sing. This is the story of that war, who started it, who has been winning it, and what we've already lost without realizing it was gone. Jeremiah once told a wandering people to stand at the crossroads, look and ask for the ancient paths, the good way, and walk in it. Episode by episode, that's what we're doing with worship. Today we start at the beginning, before instruments, before buildings, before anyone thought to argue about it at all. Christian worship did not begin with a building, a choir, or a hymnal. It began in an upper room, with a meal and a song, and it spread through homes, catacombs, and courtyards, sung, not performed, by people who had almost nothing else to hold on to. Paul told 2 different churches the same thing: let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing with gratitude in your hearts to God. Worship, from its very first instructions, was never meant to be a spectator's activity. It was something the whole room did together. We even have an outsider's account of it. Around the year 112, a Roman governor named Pliny the Younger wrote to the Emperor Trajan, describing a strange group he was investigating. Christians who gathered before dawn and took turns singing responsively to Christ as if to a god, then bound themselves by oath to live honestly. It's one of the earliest descriptions of Christian worship we have from someone who wasn't a Christian, and it already shows the pattern. Ordinary people singing together before the sun came up. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries, we start finding actual hymn texts. One of the oldest complete Christian hymns still sung today, Phos Hilaron, O Gladsome Light, comes from this era, a lamp-lighting hymn sung at evening prayer. It's proof that from the very start, the church wasn't just reciting doctrine, it was writing songs to carry that doctrine into ordinary moments, into the lighting of a lamp at the end of a hard day. Then everything changed. In 313, the Roman Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, and almost overnight, the persecuted house church movement became the empire's favored religion. That's usually told as a victory story. It was also the moment the congregation started losing its voice. As churches grew into cathedrals, worship grew into performance. Trained choirs and clergy took over roles the whole congregation once shared. Under Pope Gregory the Great, around the year 600, centuries of chant tradition were organized and codified into what we now call Gregorian chant. Hauntingly beautiful, deeply devotional, and almost entirely out of reach for the ordinary person in the pew, who by then usually couldn't even understand the Latin being sung. There were exceptions, flashes of the old fire. In the 12th century, a Benedictine abbess named Hildegard of Bingen composed original chant and sacred music of startling originality, believing her compositions were literally revealed to her. But she was the exception precisely because she was so rare. For most of 1,000 years, the people who once sang psalms together in house churches became an audience, watching worship happen at the front of the room instead of making it happen themselves. This is the first real casualty in our war. Not a doctrine, not a denomination, participation itself. The question of who gets to sing, and in what language, and by what authority, becomes the fault line every reformer after this will have to cross. In 1517, an Augustinian monk named Martin Luther nailed 95 arguments to a church door in Wittenberg, and the world split open. Almost everyone knows that story. Fewer people know that Luther fought just as hard for the church's song as he did for its doctrine. Luther believed music stood next to theology itself in importance. He didn't want trained choirs singing Latin chant to a silent congregation. He wanted the congregation singing in their own language, with melodies simple enough for a farmer to carry home. He wrote hymns himself, including the ones still sung today as "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," and he handed the church back its voice for the first time in 1,000 years. But not everyone agreed on how far that freedom should go. In Geneva, John Calvin was just as convinced that congregational singing mattered, but he believed worship should contain only what Scripture explicitly commanded. That meant psalms, and largely only psalms, set to meter and published in what became the Genevan Psalter. No hymns of human composition, no embellishment, just Scripture sung plainly by everyone. Remember these two names, because you will hear this argument again in every episode that follows, in different clothes. Luther and Calvin agreed the congregation should sing. They disagreed fundamentally on who gets to decide what they sing. That disagreement is still being fought in worship committees today. It just doesn't wear a doublet and rough collar anymore. A century and a half later in England, a sickly, brilliant young man named Isaac Watts sat in church one Sunday, unimpressed with the plodding, word-for-word psalm singing that dominated English worship, and complained to his father about it. His father's reply became one of the most consequential dares in the history of Christian music. If you think you can do better, then do better. Watts did. He began writing hymns that didn't just translate a psalm word for word, but interpreted it through the lens of Christ, what scholars call hymns of human composure. It sounds unremarkable now. In his day, it was controversial, even accused of corrupting worship with man-made words instead of God's own. Watts pressed forward anyway, eventually writing hymns still sung in nearly every English-speaking church today, including "When I Survey the Wondrous Cross" and "Joy to the World." Watts didn't just write songs. He won an argument that had been simmering since Calvin, that the church could sing more than Scripture recited verbatim. It could sing its response to Scripture. That single shift opened a door. What walked through that door next would light all of England on fire. On the evening of May 24th, 1738, a discouraged Anglican priest named John Wesley reluctantly attended a small society meeting on Aldersgate Street in London. While someone read aloud from Luther's preface to Romans, Wesley later wrote that he felt his heart strangely warmed. That night is usually remembered as the spark of the Methodist movement. It should also be remembered as the night worship got its heart back. John Wesley preached the Methodist revival across England, often outdoors, to crowds the church buildings of the day could never have held. But it was his younger brother Charles who gave that revival its voice. Charles Wesley wrote something on the order of 6,000 hymns in his lifetime. Hark! The herald angels sing, oh, for 1,000 tongues to sing, and can it be? Songs that carried Methodist theology to people who might never own a Bible or read a page of doctrine, but could memorize a hymn after hearing it twice. John Wesley famously said the world was his parish. Charles made sure the world had something to sing when it got there. Together, they did what Luther started, and Watts made room for. They handed ordinary, often illiterate people portable theology, truth they could carry in their mouths and their memory, sung in fields and coal towns and cottages, far outside any cathedral's reach. By the time John Wesley died in 1791, the fight over who gets to sing and what and how had already run 400 years, from a monk's hammer on a church door to a hillside full of coal miners singing a dead theologian's hymn from memory. That fire didn't go out. It crossed an ocean. Every episode from here forward will ask some version of the same question this one just answered for the Ancient and Reformation Church. Who gets to decide what we sing, and what do we lose or gain every time that answer changes? Next time that fire crosses the Atlantic into brush arbours and camp meetings, into the hands of two men named Moody and Sankey, and worship becomes for the first time something you could sell a ticket to.